All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. This is a show about Winnipeg musicians, and the guest on this episode is definitely a Winnipeg musician, but we're on the line right now, and you're in Guelph, Ontario. So I think that we will have to get into some backstory about, how you ended up there, and also all of the things you did while you were here. But I think to start everything off, if you want to just introduce yourself and maybe give a little bit of background on what you do musically for people who aren't familiar, and then we can take it from there.
Sure. Yeah. My name's Curtis Walker. My alias is Blunderspublik, and I've been making computer music in various cities since, 1997, I guess. So it's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always run into trouble trying to describe the music to people who haven't heard it. But yeah,
I feel like computer music is good. I mean, it definitely, I don't know if it describes it specifically, but it kind of gives you more overall sort of umbrella genre where it could fit, right?
Yeah. I'm not like sitting behind a cello or
right.
Yeah, but I mean, computer music is such a huge field too. Yeah.
Right, it could mean anything from techno to someone. Like, it could literally be anything at this point, because computers are such an integral part of music making for so many different styles of music. Anyway, right?
Yeah. In 1998, like when I put my first album out, it was more of a niche.
Yeah.
Like I make music on a computer. That was like strange. Yeah. Now it would be weird if someone didn't use a computer in the process.
That's right. Yeah. So okay, maybe that's a good way to sort of jump from there, though. Is how did you get involved in making computer music? Because like you said, when you first started releasing music in the late 90s, that wasn't really the typical route people took towards being creative. I mean, it was an outlet for sure, but computers were so much just shittier, just in general, in terms of they can do some great stuff, but compared to now, right? I mean, if someone's listening to this and they're like 20 years old and they're making music on the computer, the setup and just the amount of software and things you could just do with it were so much more limited back then. So how did you get started in that?
Well, I started on guitar actually, and I was like really interested in recording, and I was like living in my parents' basement. So I was recording on tape, and like reel to reel and making tape loops and using a karaoke machine to do overdubs of
cool.
myself.
Yeah.
But then my parents got like I think it was a 486 or computer or something, Windows 3.1.
Yeah.
And I had this epiphany one day that I could like sample cassettes and CDs into Cool Edit Pro. And so that's what got me started. I just like would sample some samples in and really mess with them until they were completely unrecognizable, and then kind of collaging them together.
Yeah.
So like in my first album, which was a CDR, like you'd never know it, but there was some Frank Zappa samples in there and stuff like that was just like obliterated beyond any recognition. And the cool thing about like the shittiness of the computer itself is that it created all these extra artifacts, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, you can't even get a computer to make a lot of those sounds anymore. But this just 2 years ago, there was the 20th anniversary of that first album I made in my basement, and so I put a remastered version up on Bandcamp, and I realized when I was tagging it that there's actually a ton of people and a lot of kids, even like 20-year-old kids these days, using trackers to make music. I was tagging it with Impulse Tracker, which was like the software that I had used in DOS in 1997.
Yeah.
And I found out there was like tons of things that were tagged with Impulse Tracker.
So your necessity is now an aesthetic choice for a lot of these people who that's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah. I mean, and the aesthetics are actually pretty different now, because I think a lot of young people use trackers to make like chiptune, like 8-bit.
Yeah.
But like that wasn't my goal at the time.
Sure. Yeah, you were just trying to make music with what you had, I guess, right? Like with the equipment available to you. Sure. So what has kind of propelled you to keep doing this for as long as you have? Because over the course of doing this podcast, I've had people on who are 18, people who are 70. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's such a wide range, but I mean, to be doing the same project for as long as you have. I mean, I realize you've done a lot of different things with it, but it's I mean, that's longevity, I think, as far as being an experimental type of musician as well.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting question because it is just like curiosity and a drive that continues, you know. There have been like a lot of moments, like especially actually in the transition moving from Winnipeg to Guelph was a moment where I could have just given up, you know.
Right.
I actually, like, everything was in boxes. Like, I had no idea where my MIDI controller was for like a year and a half, you know.
Yeah.
And it would have been a lot easier to actually just
bail.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know what, I'm just gonna start making shoegaze music with my guitar and like
yeah.
But like, I at this point I kind of can't stop, you know. Like the song ideas keep coming, you know, and I have this like horrible folder on my cell phone that's like 300 song ideas.
Oh
you
yeah,
know, I'm never gonna make those 300 songs, but like, you know, the inspiration never stops coming, so it's, you know, you kind of have to let it out somehow.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, if even one of those songs out of the 300 becomes something, it seems like a success, right? I mean, you know, having all those ideas and at least making a few of them come to fruition.
Yeah. Well, and this is what always happens. It's like I'm just goofing around in my studio for 4 years, and then I'm like, oh, I have, you know, 10 songs. I guess I have an album now, you know.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, I made these songs, I guess I should put them out, right? And then I guess because I love them, I should put the work into promoting them, you know.
Yeah. Well, and you're self-releasing this, right? These are all being self-released.
Yeah.
So there's a whole other level of I guess deciding, these songs are what you want people to hear, because you're putting all the work into not only writing and recording them, but promoting them and getting them pressed on whether it's on CD or however you're doing it for whatever album, right? So there's So I guess you have to like it enough to want to put those out there.
Yeah, exactly. and I mean, I think if you, I don't know, I can't even imagine making music that you don't enjoy yourself. But I mean, I'm kind of the opinion these days that there's maybe like too much music, you know. So I do feel a little bit of guilt, like adding another hour of music to the pile, you know, the now infinite pile of music. But you know, I do think it's actually like 42 minutes well spent if someone sat down and listened to the album, you know. So
right. Well, that is a problem, actually, though, just in general. I mean, it comes up a lot on the show, regardless of who I'm talking to. It's that, you know, the internet has made it so everyone can release music instantly, which is fantastic. You can record something in your bedroom and put it online the same day, and people can hear it all over the world, which is great. But there's also 100 times more people doing that, and you know, 90% of it is terrible. Yeah. And then now the ones who are actually doing really good, insightful, interesting music, they have to find a way to market themselves to get their heads above the crowd of everybody else doing stuff. And I think there's a lot of things that get lost because a lot of people are good at the creative side of things, but not necessarily the I don't want to call it the business side, but it almost is the business side. Yeah, even definitely. For independent artists, like just to get yourself heard. And I mean, you've been doing it for a long time, and your name certainly, like, people know who you are. They've heard your music, and that you have an advantage, I guess, there. But still, you're up against, you know, every 20-year-old kid who's now has decided that your aesthetic is their aesthetic. And you have to kind of find a way to get it out there, right?
Yeah. And I was online the other day, and so I don't know who it was, but somebody said like, oh yeah, you know, I put all my garbage music on SoundCloud, and I like reserve like Bandcamp for the good stuff. And I was thinking, like, why put the garbage music anywhere at all?
just save the good stuff and put it on everything. Yeah.
I have a problem with like uncurated, you know, music.
Well, and we're in a world where it's so easy to have uncurated music, because you can literally release everything and just barf it up there. And it's
and maybe you're like me, like you're like me, and like I'm so curious about music that I can't resist the urge to like listen to something. And
Totally.
if it's sitting in front of me, it's like, oh, is this going to be exciting? Oh, no, it's not. Okay.
Yeah. But then there's always this tinge of like, wait, I've given it a couple songs and it's terrible, but maybe there'll be like the third song will have some kind of hook to it and I'll dig it. But yeah, I know what you mean for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, you have a new record coming out, and you're, kind of jumping off what we were just talking about. How do you intend to kind of promote this record now that you are releasing something new and you have whatever identity you have that people recognize you or are familiar with the name? How do you get it out there? How do you get it above people's heads, or do you even care about that at this point?
Well, like historically, I've been famously bad at the promotion part of it, which is why I've like always, I would prefer to like not put it out myself in a lot of instances. But in recent years, I've gotten a little more savvy with it, like I've actually got a mailing list now.
Okay.
And like evidence actually shows that an email is kind of a more effective way of actually reaching people than random social media posts.
Yeah, because they have to opt in, right? They're like choosing to give you their contact info, so they obviously want enough of they like it enough to want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, and if they're gonna open the email, then they're probably gonna read the email. Whereas like maybe 1,000 people see it in the news feed, but no one's slowing down to
they're just
read that, right?
Scrolling forever.
Yeah. So I've got a few more tricks up my sleeve. I mean, it's still a huge slog, right? And there's a lot of memes about that. You spend like years like crafting this finely tuned music, and someone listens to the first 45 seconds.
That's right. That's a huge thing, is that there's no guarantee anymore that someone's going to listen to a piece of music from start to finish. They're gonna, even if it's intended to be this one overarching piece of music over 10 tracks or whatever, the odds on someone actually doing that is so slim now, and they're going to pick track 8 and listen to it for 10 seconds and then move on to the next thing, right?
And it feels like very arrogant of me to be releasing an 11 song album.
Right.
But I have 11 songs. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to the album today, and one thing I noticed about it, and I don't know if this is something that you've done intentionally or if I'm just reading into it too much, but it definitely has, especially for the first part of it, the first few tracks, there's a really ominous kind of vibe to it. Like it sounds darker, I think, than some of the other stuff you've done, and it has this kind of like doomy, gloomy sort of feeling to it, and that sort of permeates the whole first 3 or 4 tracks.
Yeah. And that was kind of unintentional, actually. The way I assemble most of my albums is really just like the favorite songs that I've put together in the past few years.
Okay.
But I'm very much drawn to like songs that have either like a darker sensibility, like a minor chord progression, or that are like emotionally like very ambiguous.
Okay.
Like
kind of flat.
Well, no, it's like I don't know how to feel about this chord progression.
Okay.
I've actually like put out a mix on SoundCloud of like it's called Between Moods, and it's all songs that are like neither like happy or sad, but this kind of like, I mean, there's 1,000 other emotions you can feel,
Sure, of course, yeah.
Between like a major chord progression and a minor chord progression. But I do agree. Like when I was assembling it, like I think the hardest part is like doing the track listing, because I wanted to have. There's also a lot of songs with singing on this, which is kind of atypical for what I do. So I wanted to balance like singing and not singing back and forth, and like more positive feel and more negative feel kind of back and forth. So there's like lumps of emotion that happen, but I definitely, when I'm putting a song together, I tend towards the darker side. Yeah. And when I'm listening to music too, like I always much prefer like a more moody chord progression.
Well, I don't know if dark is even the right word. It almost like almost foreboding. Like it almost seems like there's it's like something bad is going to happen at some point on the record, and this is just kind of getting you set up in the mood to anticipate. But then it gets a lot sunnier. Like, you go through that first little section of foreboding, and then things
Yeah.
brighten up a bit. And like you said, there's singing, and there's kind of a much more major chords, I guess, like, in terms of the overall tone of it. So
Yeah.
is it like when you listen back to it, do you feel do you have a different feeling of experiencing the whole thing start to front than maybe you did when you were individually assembling the tracks?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think a lot about that when I'm like assembling the track listing, is like, what is the experience of going from like 1 to 11? And you know, sadly I kind of want to take into account like the short attention spans of
Yeah.
listeners too, right? So like, if you're going to jump in the middle, like what's that going to feel like by the end?
Right.
But I think I've assembled it into a bit of a journey, and towards the end of the album, I do feel like there is a bit of a descent, and it could be a bummer for sure.
Well, you set them up for it at the beginning, though. There's the foreboding, something bad's about to happen, right?
Yeah. But there's like moments of high energy, like kind of bookending the album too.
Sure.
So it's not just like all like slow and foreboding.
Yeah.
And there's like the second to last track. I'm definitely like paying an homage to like Jesu and Godflesh with the second to last track, which is kind of, it's actually more of like a positive chord progression anyways, but it's aggressive again.
Yeah.
And it's a like kind of funny contradiction, because if you meet me walking down the street, I'm like a happy-go-lucky guy, like not an ounce of aggression in me, but maybe I just like exercise all that in the music.
Does that come from what you're listening to as well? Like, I mean, were you maybe like heavily listening to Godflesh or something at the time that you put that together, or is that just something that seeps in kind of subconsciously?
No, I was listening to Godflesh when I was like 15.
Yeah.
So that all just like soaks in,
Yeah.
I grew up in like the the grunge era, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I still listen to Godflesh, so it's
oh yeah.
No judgment. I love Godflesh. Yeah, great band. Yeah.
No, but like, if I like, I also really love, I listen to literally like every genre of music. But like take ambient for example, like I have no patience for like something that's really like soft, like borderline like new age meditation ambient, like I need like a grittiness and a grunginess and like some texture to it, and some distortion, so I think like for better or for worse, like what we listened to when we were teenagers like always seeps back in.
It does. Yeah. I think there's like a certain age group, and whatever you're listening to, that no matter how good or bad it is, it always becomes like it's permanently stuck in a part of your brain where this is the best music that was ever released, even if it's objectively terrible. Like it's just, you were around when whatever age you were, 13 or something, when whatever it is that hit you, you're stuck with it. And I think it's definitely the case for sure. Yeah.
Totally. You can still cringe about it now, but like,
but you still love it though, right? You secretly love it. Yeah. Well, that's maybe a good / awkward segue into your Kittens and Shit album, because that is kind of I mean, I'd heard your name before. I'm sure I'd heard some tracks here and there, but that was sort of the entry point for me, is hearing that, because the concept of it was so cool. And as someone who sort of hoards local music and tries to well, hoard, I guess, is the best word for it, but I can understand the desire to bring some of that stuff back in a new way. So based on the songs that you've chosen there, I mean, I first started going to shows in Winnipeg, all ages shows, around 95, so that stuff is like just predates me. So a lot of those bands like I've heard since and I knew of, but it's very cool to kind of hear some of that stuff now as an adult. But as a teenager, they're all just names that I still on posters or whatever, right? So what is your sort of background, I guess, in the local music scene? It seems like it tends towards some of the heavier stuff.
Yeah, well, like even then I was super curious about all kinds of music, and every weekend we'd go to one or two all ages shows. We just like bounce between the West End Cultural Center, or like Aussies would probably have a show, or like, I don't know, like a couple other venues that have been and gone,
yeah. Some of them long gone.
Yeah, totally. But I was also like spending any disposable income I had on like, yeah, buying cassettes or like buying the 7-inch or buying the CD and listening to it obsessively.
Yeah.
And like I had a pretty broad taste back then. So I mean, I was excited by the really heavy stuff, but also like, you know, the Bonaducci's or something
Yeah.
that was like a bit lighter and poppier. And the bands I played in at the time, well, like in the 90s, like early 90s, I was like in a kind of pop punk band. So you know, that stuff was exciting to me too. But I mean, the interesting thing about putting Kittens and Shit together was like there was a lot of other bands I could have also covered, but
Right.
you can't like you can't go online and find out how to play like a Painted Thin song. You know, there's no
Yeah.
tab
No
anywhere.
tab on. Yeah.
And
For
there's
sure.
like, and then all you have is a crappy tape that's been sitting around for 20 years, so you can barely hear the guitar
Yeah.
parts anymore. You know, so part of like, I love every song that I covered there, of course, but
I should hope so. Yeah.
given the chance, I would have covered a bunch more. And actually, it started a Bulletproof Nothing cover too that I never finished.
Oh, cool.
And that was kind of partly as an homage to, because they were the first live band I ever saw in Winnipeg when I was like, they opened for Sloan
Okay.
at Le Rendezvous, and I don't even know what year that was, like 1993 or 94 or something.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like, oh, I should probably do a Bulletproof Nothing cover, you know. And like in the 30 years since, like I've gotten to know like Steve Bates and Mike Germain, or like guys like that. So I kind of felt like, you know, they're the granddaddies, I should like pay some respect, you know.
Yeah.
But I never did finish that cover.
Well, it's a cool concept though, because I mean, like, you know, you have obviously a very different style than most of those artists that
Yeah.
you covered, and so it's hopefully you introduced some people to some of those bands. Like, I mean, I don't know if how much crossover there is between your audience and you know, say Kitten's audience, but it would be cool to find out if someone maybe went back and dug up some of those old records after hearing, you know, what you had to do on your versions.
Yeah, totally. And when I covered the Shit song,
Yeah.
I was thinking like, there's no way like anyone is going to even be able to hear the original, even if they wanted to.
Right. Yeah.
So, so I made a little YouTube video with the original cassette, just like in case anyone's like so curious that they want to.
Oh, as a reference. Yeah.
As, you know, what that song is based off of, they can hop on YouTube and like hear the original at least.
Yeah.
Kittens are a little more available at least, but
yeah, I mean, you can definitely find some of the records floating around out there and stuff for sure. Yeah. So,
but man, they were like the most exciting thing to me when I saw them.
Yeah, they're unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those records are still exciting too. Like they still sound like it's just so much action happening kind of all at once. Yeah.
Totally.
So you obviously have an affinity for Winnipeg music, right? Or otherwise you wouldn't have spent the time on that project. Do you still do you have like positive nostalgia about Winnipeg? You know, now that you're not here anymore, do you what is your sort of outsider's view now on the Winnipeg music scene? You know, whether past or present, like however you kind of see it.
You know, like I love Winnipeg actually, and I was reluctant to leave, frankly. Yeah. Like I left you know, I left a career behind, and you know, when I moved kind of like for our family to Guelph, and Guelph was a neutral ground, like it's not my wife's hometown or anything like that either, but we both said like, oh, we'll give it a year and try it out. And actually that's how I tricked her into moving to Winnipeg in the first place. I said like, let's move. Like, we were living in Montreal, and we both lost our jobs, and like some of our best friends were moving away from Montreal, and I said like, let's move to Winnipeg, like let's just give it a year, you know. And then then she was trapped there for 9 years, but like yeah, she learned to appreciate it in that time, and I still really love Winnipeg. And I think like the music scene like gets kicked around constantly, and when like there's always venues shutting down and
Yeah, especially now
like,
with the craziness going on.
yeah now, but I mean even before then it's like seemed so hard to keep a venue alive for like more than 3 years.
But then bands keep getting churned out. Like it seems like that doesn't stop anyone. Like people will
Yeah,
find somewhere to
exactly.
play, whether it's some guy's basement or whatever. Like there's the venues just turn around. It kind of sucks because some of them have so much history and so much, so many cool things that have happened and amazing bands that have played there. But yeah, they churn them around and something else comes up and then 7,000 new bands start the next week and it's like back
Yeah.
to the same old. Yeah. Do
Totally.
you? I think that Winnipeg, and this is like I'm part of this too for sure, has this idea of ourselves as being something. I don't want to say something special as far as the music scene goes, but I think we have a maybe a bigger reputation outside of the city than we do. And I never know about that because I'm always here. I rarely leave Manitoba for any reason. And so my idea is that, yeah, Winnipeg is amazing. We have this great music scene. I mean, I've been talking about it twice a week for 8 years now on this podcast, right? So, I mean, what is your, I guess, perception of that, removed from Winnipeg? Like, is Winnipeg like everywhere else, or do we have something particularly unique to our music scene?
No, I think it is special actually. And having lived in other cities,
Yeah.
Like I and I'm not going to churn out like the same cliches about why people are more creative in Winnipeg.
Yeah, there's the same answer everyone gives.
Yeah. But there, in places like I moved to Montreal and I was immediately noticing all the differences in that, like Montreal was very much more cliquey, like
Okay.
if you made computer music, you played shows with other people who made computer music, whereas like in Winnipeg, like I could open for somebody who made hip hop, or I could open for like an indie rock band, or I could open for experimental noise headliner, which was exciting and like both to be on stage, but also like in the audience, it's exciting to kind of see different styles and be exposed to different styles in the same night, and it makes for like a more well-rounded listener,
and a more well-rounded community too, because people are all joining each other's bands, and you have someone who's a punk band one day and next week they're playing bass in a country band because of that exact thing, right? They had the opportunity to play on the same bill as this country band, and then we need a bass player. Hey, that guy from last week.
Yeah, and before I moved away, the second time, I was playing in a band called Velodrome, which was like, totally different scene, like, and that scene was like totally open, welcoming, and even though I hadn't played heavy music in a really long time, I already knew a lot of people in the scene.
Of course, yeah.
And they were already really friendly, and like a lot of those like metal guys like knew Blunderspublik music, So it's so much easier to move around in different circles
when everyone's so incestuous, interconnected. Yeah, for sure. So if people are hearing about you for the first time on this show, I mean, again, there's such a wide range of people I talk to. It's very possible that, this could be someone's first introduction to you. What's the best way to find out more about what you're doing? I mean, you're not here in Winnipeg, not that anyone's playing shows here in Winnipeg anyway, but, because of the pandemic, but you're a Winnipeg expat, I guess we can call you. And so what's the best option to track down your records? Obviously the new one included, and just to see what you're up to.
Well, Bandcamp has, my Bandcamp page is a pretty thorough back catalog of most of what I've put out in the last like 10 years at least. And sadly, like I have a Facebook page, and you can always go there and check it out.
Yeah.
And I've got a bunch of videos on YouTube, and I like goofing around on Twitter. So if you want to like get in touch with me, that's a good place to get in touch with me. Yeah.
Cool.
So those are the main venues. Like Bandcamp is, I think, really good for a good overview of like what I've been doing in the past long while.
Well, it's a way people can buy the music from you directly too, which is always nice.
Yeah. Or just listen to it for free,
or that, yeah. For sure. Are there copies like of your old records floating around anywhere, or like can people still pick, or are those long gone out of print?
You know, like I dropped some off at Into the Music before I left, and
Yeah. So they might be there.
yeah. You know, check the pawn shops. Actually, a friend of mine who lives in Toronto, who actually like we had a record label in Winnipeg, like record label.
Yeah.
It was kind of more like a collective, but we both started it together. Anyways, he sent me a message the other day saying that somebody was on Discogs trying to sell the Velodrome LP for $225.
Oh wow. You know what though? There is like I like Discogs. I don't buy anything on there because I can't handle like the shipping costs are so crazy for almost everything I want. But I have advertised a copy of my '90s ska band CDR for like some obscene amount of money. No one's gonna buy it, but I just like the idea that it's there, and that if someone sees it, oh, this is worth $500. No, it's worth 10 cents. But you know, like, maybe I can make people think that yeah.
That's a good angle. I haven't thought of that angle yet. Like...
Yeah. Well, the reason I thought of it too is I know a guy here in the city who I don't know if he still does it, but he had a tape label, and I noticed a bunch of stuff on his label was being sold on Discogs for obscene amounts of money. So I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, it's just my friend who is just like cranking up the prices, and if he sells them, he'll give me half the proceeds from it." So I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." It's a good way to artificially increase the importance of the perceived importance of your records.
Yeah.
And so the new album, what's the title of it? We didn't mention that yet.
Oh yeah, it's called Trackers Trails.
Trackers Trails. Okay.
Yeah, and so the image on the cover is an old photograph that I actually dug out from my family cottage.
Oh, cool.
So it's this like massive evergreen tree that grows near the lake at the cottage, and then I think I came up with the cover art and the title separately, but Trackers Trails is kind of like for any super nerd out there, is a reference to like the tracker software that I used to use like 20 years ago. And so Trackers Trails is like a reference to these songs all came after that era of Blunderspublik.
Okay.
But
cool.
I mean, to anyone who's not a nerd, they would just like see an evergreen tree and Trackers Trails and kind of think of
forest or hiking or something.
Yeah, hunting,
Yeah, but it is kind of an ominous picture too, though. I mean, I don't know if that's just maybe I was looking at it while I was listening, but it has this kind of foreboding vibe to it as well, and so does the font. Like,
yeah. Well, actually, I was talking about that with my son because, like, I was goofing around with the graphic design of the cover art, and I was like, do you like this version better or this version better?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, no, I like this one because it looks dark, like it's nighttime. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm afraid of, though. It looks too ominous, maybe.
Yeah. Well, it suits the vibe at the beginning of the record, anyway, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe it suits like the kind of larger emotional state of the world.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't like. I personally like to listen to music that matches the emotional state I'm in.
Yeah.
Some other people like to kind of like do the opposite, but
I know what you mean, though. There's definitely even seasonal. Like there's summer records. There's records I won't listen to in the winter because they just, for whatever reason, and it's not necessarily that it's sunny music. It just evokes summertime for me, and it would feel wrong to listen to it in the wintertime. So I get that for sure. There's definitely stuff that suits the mood and the feeling for sure.
Yeah, and that was kind of one of my motivations for getting it out sooner, is like, it's not a summer record.
Right.
Right. I got to get it out before spring really hits,
Yeah, before people are happy again.
Although like the track that I made the music video for is called Summer Glow, and it is like kind of a celebration of summer.
It's more upbeat than a lot. I think that's the turning point. Actually, that's where things sort of suddenly go on an upswing from emotionally, right? It's dark and foreboding, and then that happens, and then there's kind of a rise from there with a few other tracks too. So it's kind of a cool midpoint of the record.
Thanks. Yeah, I wrote that like sitting in my front yard in Riverview with at the time I had infant son who's just like toddling around and feeling the grass, and it was like a perfect summer day in Winnipeg. We had this like huge tree elm tree, which you don't really see in Ontario.
Right,
You know,
right.
shading the sun. It was, yeah.
Cool.
And miraculously, I had like a bunch of footage already shot from my camera that
Oh, right
kind
on.
of matched that well. And actually, I think that's the exact same tree that I'm referencing in the lyrics
Oh,
that
cool,
show up
cool.
in the video.
That's really cool. Yeah, yeah. So when is that actually coming out? By the time this airs, it might already be out. But what's the release date?
I'm putting it out March 4th,
March 4th.
which
Okay.
coincidentally is the day before Bandcamp Friday.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, that's good timing. And I guess Bandcamp's where you want people to go to get a copy of that, yeah, to get the digital version.
Yeah, that's the only place where it'll be available. Yeah, but I've got the music video too that I'll be putting out. Like, yeah, it'll be out by the time this airs, and
Awesome.
that'll be on YouTube and Facebook.
Right on.